Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 18th, 2020, 5 o'clock p.m. remote meeting participation of the Auburn Zoning Board of Appeals. I have a little bit of housing and to take care of before we get started, so I'm going to read my script that I've read the last couple of months. So the first thing I have to do is, as an open matter, this is Bob Taylor, Chair of the Auburn Zoning Board of Appeals. In an effort to reduce background noise, I'm going to ask that all of you please mute your phones at this time and only unmute if you're going to speak. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So all I'm going to do is go down and make sure that everyone that is supposed to be here at the meeting this evening can hear me. Vice Chair, Mr. Marin.
I'm here, Bob.
Thank you. Mr. Chicolo. Thank you. Mr. Cussy?
I'm here, Bob.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Roach?
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And Ms. Bush?
I'm here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So town officials and employees participating. When I call your name, if you are here and present with us, please respond in the affirmative. Building Commissioner Caleb Moody.
Here.
DDIS Director Darlene Coyle.
Here.
Thank you and welcome, Ms. Coyle, and Town Planner Adam Menard.
Here.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, so the introduction to the remote meeting. Good evening. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Zoning Board of Appeals on Thursday, June 18, 2020, now called to order at 5 p.m. This meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the COVID state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, to which you can find posted on the agenda materials for this meeting on the town's website, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so as long as reasonable public access is offered, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the Zoning Board of Appeals is convening by remote participation for the public only, although some staff may be physically located in the Selectmen's meeting room at the Town Hall. Those town employees are practicing social distancing in accordance with the Governor's orders. For the public to join this meeting remotely by telephone, call 1-646-749-3112 and enter the access code 944-571-349. Or the public can join via computer at gotomeeting.com, join 944-57-1349. The remote access information has been posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television and will be posted on the town YouTube channel. Accordingly, those members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, employees, and members of the public participate. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and please take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you may broadcast may be captured by the recording. Meeting materials. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Meeting business ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, Robert Taylor, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line for members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, question, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in discussion with other members, please go through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comments as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, I will call each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments as needed. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a full roll call vote. In the event you have any technical difficulties, the chair will suspend the meeting while attempts to resolve the issue are made and keep accurate minutes noting any disconnections and reconnections for the membership. Okay. So with that being said, do I have a motion to open the 5 o'clock ZBA meeting? Do I have a motion to open?
It's Megan through the chair. Motion to open.
Thank you. Ms. Rhodes, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Jones, thank you for the second. All right. I don't think that's necessary for a roll call vote, but all in favor? Mr. Cuffey?
Open, yep.
Mr. Chicolo?
Yes, open.
Thank you. Mr. Maron?
Aye, open.
Ms. Bush?
Eyes open.
Excellent, thank you, and I do as well. So on 5 o'clock p.m. applicant Daniel Campbell requesting a special permit under section 3.2.2.10 of the Auburn zoning bylaw for an accessory apartment on property located at 75 Prospect Street, Auburn, Mass, map 67, parcel 7. Reminders to the members of the board, this is a continuation from 4/23 and 5/21/20 meetings. Is the applicant present?
Yes, I am present.
Excellent. And before I get started, just for the record, do I have any abutters present this evening that would like to speak? If you can just briefly identify yourself. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hearing no abutters for the time being, unless someone else joins the meeting, we're going to move forward. So, Mr. Campbell, sir, could you bring us up to date on your project?
Yeah, so I submitted the most recent design, which shows a fully enclosed breezeway going directly from my existing garage and connecting all the way to the new garage where the accessory apartment would be.
Okay.
I'm hoping that was exactly what you guys were looking for. And, you know, because I know you said you wanted it enclosed with some windows and things. So that's the design I had submitted.
All right, I'm just going to have them go right around the board. We'll start from the top again. Vice Chair Maron, do you have any questions or concerns for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to reserve other questions, but just a quick question and a comment for clarification. So as it's designed, I recall previous plans showed an existing deck. Is it your intention to remove that deck completely and construct what we have before?
I'm not sure about moving it completely or remove it completely. If I have to, you know, cut out a section of the deck to accommodate the breezeway, that's what I'll do. I'm assuming once, you know, the construction starts and the contractor's starting with me and everything, that I'm sure the building inspector will give me all my exact, exact way that I need to build it, and, you know, all my codes requirements that I need to meet and things like that. So I'm hoping to just kind of maybe just cut out that section of the deck, put the breezeway in, and just have the deck kind of go around that corner. If I have to remove more of the deck, basically whatever the building requirements and building codes are going to have me do, then, you know, whatever I need to do, I'll do.
So, thank you, sir. So just for clarity, what we're viewing now, okay, so that's the existing deck, correct?
Yeah, so that's the existing deck. Basically, my garage, it doesn't face the street; it faces my neighbor, in a sense. So when you come in off the street and driving into my house, you can't see my garage door. You kind of have to you turn like a left-hand turn into my existing garage. So that's the side of my house. So that breezeway would come off the back corner of that existing garage, and then go more towards my backyard, and then connect to the new garage.
Okay, so, and just one final comment for me, Mr. Chairman. So what, if we can go back to, so this new design that's being proposed this evening does not clearly outline what would be happening with the existing deck. And so I, for one, am just seeking some clarification on what that looks like. I understand the new design that's being proposed. I think it's clear. What's not clear to me at this time is what happens with that deck and how it truly will interact with that. But I'll reserve additional questions for later on in the hearing.
All right. If you're all set, I'm going to move to Mr. Cussy. Do you have any questions or concerns of the applicant, sir?
I don't at the moment.
All right. Mr. Chicolo.
I also, at this particular time, don't have any questions.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Roach.
I do not have any additional questions at this time.
All right. So I'm going to reserve on Mr. Jones and Ms. Bush because right now we have a full contingent in the interest of kind of moving forward ahead on this particular project. If nobody else has anything to add, I'm going to go back to the Vice Chair, Mr. Marin. I've already looked for abutters. I can try one more time, but if not, do you have any other questions of the applicant, Mr. Marin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll just go back to my final point in that and comment that we've discussed this property in previous hearings. I appreciate what the applicant has brought forward as far as looking to be amenable for our particular bylaw, which indicates that in order to meet the criteria for this applicant, we would need to have these two structures connecting. I think the design satisfies that. I would like to see specifically that.
Mr. Marin? All right, now whatever that was, it just stopped. Mr. Marin, can you hear me?
I can, and I'll just repeat my last comment. Is that what I'd like clarity on again is my final point that I'd like to know exactly what the final design does with the existing deck.
Okay, thank you. So,
I can try to talk it through a little more. So I have a walkout basement the way my grade on my house is. So the existing deck is actually it's a weird extension to my foundation in a sense off the back of the house that the deck is kind of built onto. So the existing deck is the same ground level as my driveway. So I'm gonna do my best to blend the breezeway into the deck because there'll be the floor of the breezeway would be basically the same height of the floor as the deck, right, all on the same level. So I'm going to kind of do my best to blend it in, whether I have to add extra railings or whatever the case may be. I don't know exactly the final design until my father's more or less going to be my contractor. He holds the contractor's license, so he's going to kind of help do the designing exactly what it needs to be per the building code. And then whatever, obviously whatever opinions the building inspector has to make it, the way he would like it. So I don't know exactly how it's going to tie in, but, obviously I'm going to try to make it look the best that I can, seeing as, it's my house, and obviously I want it to look as good as I can possibly make it look.
Sure. So it looks to me, if I'm not mistaken, based on the illustration that I'm seeing in front of me on the screen now, which it says New Plan 75 Prospect Street at the bottom. The breezeway, as it sort of cantilevers off the house and comes down to meet grade, it looks to me, just based on your design, you intend to kind of absorb the deck into the construction because of its probably usefulness in terms of being able to transition from one type of flooring material to another. Is that kind of what I'm looking at?
For the most part, yeah. The ground level of the new garage versus the ground level of the deck is maybe only a foot difference just because of the taper of the yard. So however, construction-wise, however we need to get that to match up correctly, and then to be able to kind of still utilize a portion of the existing deck, I I may add like a sliding door into the back. Equally, that kind of opens to the deck, and then maybe vice versa on the other side, have a sliding door on the other side of the breezeway that opens into the driveway, so that I can still, because as of right now, I have a pass-through, kind of, a normal, like, single-width door pass-through that I can walk from my driveway and step up onto my deck at that back corner of my garage. So, whether I put another man door in or a sliding door on each side to be able to continue to use that walk-through to get from the deck to the driveway.
Right. Okay. So, Mr. Marin, sir, my question to you is, did my just brief conversation with the applicant clear up anything of concerns you had? If we do decide to move forward with this particular hearing tonight, we can always make some of your concerns part of a condition of a permit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll specifically say I want to recognize the level of effort and collaboration that Mr. Campbell has brought forward to date on this project. And I think it's just for a matter of thought that maybe it's important that the board sees a final design, and maybe it's not. But I'm for one, I'm not seeing a final design based on how it incorporates the deck and the construction. And I leave it to the board to decide whether or not that's a concern or whether that's necessary. But I don't see a final design. I see a vision. I think what's been described to us is a reasonable approach, but I'm not seeing a final design.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand that.
Yes. If I could just add one more thing. So I've been dealing with an architect designer to help me design these plans as we go. The only reason I don't have all final designs is because obviously I was waiting to get my approvals and things first before I hired the surveyor and spent the money on the surveyor and things like that. So once the survey's done and I have exact dimensions and things, it'll be much easier to, obviously by that point I'll have to submit a hard plan to the building department in order for my building permit. So, as far as like the final design, this is pretty much final design in my eyes, because the design that the architect design created for me is the exact path that I would need to do and the exact route that I need to go in order to make this connection.
All right. So really, I'm just trying to go back to Mr. Marin. Do you have any more questions or comments to the applicant, given the additional information he presented?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. So I did note that while we were talking, a couple of other people that I did not see who they were identified-wise were joining the meeting. So I'm just going to identify that we are in the 5:00 p.m. application, Daniel Campbell again. So do I have any abutters present or that may have recently signed in that would like to comment on this particular hearing? All right, I'll do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Through the chair, if I may. Bob?
Yeah, actually, just coming to you, Caleb. Please go ahead.
I just for clarification, I think Ms. Roach missed the last meeting, so Mr. Jones may be participating in this hearing rather than Ms. Roach.
Okay, so let me clarify that. Ms. Roach, so I do understand, you were not here for the last meeting. Did you bring yourself up to speed and sign off on this particular hearing?
Unfortunately, I did not, so I agree with Caleb. I am not able to vote at this meeting on this particular hearing.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I should have probably asked for that first, but I'm glad that Caleb brought it up. So for the record, we will be bringing Mr. Jones up as a full voting member. So I'm going to give Mr. Jones the opportunity to ask any questions of the applicant or have a discussion with the other board members in order to bring him up to speed. So he is kind of even where we are all right now. Mr. Jones, I give the floor to you, sir.
Thank you. I do have one question just to make sure I understand the images presented to the board. So I'm looking at what looks like a small garage attached to a two-story garage. Is that the small garage basically the right side of your house?
Correct. If you're looking at my house from the street, that garage is on the right side of my house. The garage doors do not face the road. They face the property directly next to me. So from the street view, you can't see my garage doors until you drive down into the driveway, and then the garage doors would be on your left-hand side. So you're almost taking a left-hand turn into the garage, the existing garage on the house.
Okay, and so the breezeway, that runs through where the pool appears in the aerial view of your home?
Yeah, so, basically from the back corner of the existing garage, if you're looking at the aerial view and the existing garage is on the right-hand side, from that back corner, the breezeway kind of tapers more. It goes towards the backyard and a little to the right more, and that's where the new garage would be placed.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
And a little further off to the right. Because I believe my property is about 300 feet deep, and the house sits almost at the middle of it. Even with the garage going further back, I think it still leaves me, 40 to 50 or so feet from the back property line. And then from my neighbor's property line where I want to put the garage, I know I need a 10-foot setback, but I think I'll still be somewhere 15 to 20 feet off from that as well. And then there's plenty of woods here, so it's kind of going to be tucked away towards the back.
That's all my questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I appreciate that. So I'm going to go around Mr. Cussy one more time.
I'm all set, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chicolo?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I've got a question for Caleb. Actually, question/statement. Per our zoning bylaws, I just want to reaffirm that should this application be approved, this will have to go to the planning board.
Caleb, do we agree with Mr. Chicolo's interpretation of this?
Normally, the planning board will issue waivers on a residential application. So this is not something that they would typically review.
Say that they won't even look at this.
They normally don't review this type of application, that's correct.
Doesn't our bylaws state that special permits need to be reviewed by the planning board?
They do, but the applicant has the ability to request waivers, and the planning board doesn't generally put a whole lot of review into a residential application that's already been before the planning board, already been before the zoning board like this.
So should this application be approved with the stipulation that we want the planning board to take a look at it, will that change the way they view it?
The applicant still has the ability to request waivers from the planning board.
Even though we are specifically requesting that the planning board take a look at it?
Yeah, I'm not clear on what the planning board would review that you're not reviewing right now.
I'm actually referring to that long structure that's in between the two. For the sake of convenience, we'll call it a massive breezeway.
So that would be under your board's jurisdiction. If you don't feel that this fits with the neighborhood, that is exactly what this board should be reviewing tonight. The planning.
Actually, what I'm concerned with is the structure of it. In other words, what's it going to be on? Is it going to be on a 4-foot footing, and that's why I mentioned the planning board.
Well, that isn't something the planning board would review. That would be something that I would review under the building permit process. Yeah, it would have to meet the state building code.
And we don't need a stipulation then, should this be approved, for that to happen?
No, it has to meet the building code regardless of your condition.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions, Mr. Chicolo?
All set, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so Mr. Jones, you've heard everything again, I think, around the horn. I'll give you one last opportunity. Anything to add or concerns?
Nothing further.
All right, so I'm going to make a motion
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Michael Merriman, sorry to interrupt you. I do have one final question for the applicant for the memory's sake, if I may. So through the chair, Mr. Campbell, could you remind the board the length that we're talking about here? I understand that there's a couple of there's a downward slope and then a jog in. But what's the overall distance of this connected structure?
Again, until I get the actual survey done, I'm not positive, but my goal is to make it as short as possible because, I had a budget in mind for the garage in general, and now, creating this breezeway enclosed with windows and things, it's going to, put the budget a little higher than expected. So the shorter I can make it, the better. Guessing, the section between the corner of the garage that's going to go along the side of the deck is roughly 8 to 10 feet, and then from the corner of the deck, or the corner of that portion there that goes around the deck to the new garage, I'm hoping is only about 25 feet or so.
So on average, and no one's going to hold you to this, even though it is a public hearing, we're talking about a 35-foot run.
Yeah, that's my goal. If I can make it shorter, if I can bring the garage, the new garage closer towards the front of my property without, infringing on the 10-foot abutting rule next to my neighbor, then I'll bring it closer and shorten the breezeway. Because the way my house sits on my property at a funny angle, facing the street, it doesn't sit like parallel to the property lines on either side. It sits kind of at an angle. So, I'm trying to match the angle of the new garage with the house as much as possible to kind of keep the flow looking good. So if I can, the closer, basically I'm going to bring it as close as I can bring it without infringing on the 10-foot, rule going against my neighbor. And with that said, I think I'll be able to get it about a roughly 35-foot overall length of the breezeway.
Appreciate your comments. And so, Mr. Chairman, for the thoughts of the board, if I may, before we move forward, I think that the measurements there are important, and it speaks to what the building commissioner has just mentioned. The action before us is to determine if this fits within the neighborhood. And so I think that the length of that structure calls into question whether or not, in fact, it would fit, and that's, I think, for the board's consideration. I would submit that I think, even minimally, and I appreciate the applicant's thoughtful comments on trying to minimize that length, but 35-foot run is certainly substantially larger than what I would consider a standard breezeway, so to speak, if we can call it a standard. And so, again, for the board's consideration, I think that those measurements matter based on whether or not it is a fit. But I don't have anything further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I might ask another question.
Yes, Mr. Crowell, please go ahead.
What were the final dimensions of that accessory apartment? What are we looking at for square footage?
Mr. Campbell, for the applicant, can you answer the question from Mr. Chicolo, please? The square footage of the actual apartment itself?
So the actual apartment itself will be the 700 square foot that I'm allowed for the bylaws.
Okay. Mr. Chicolo?
So you will not be taking the total of the top of that garage, or you will?
No, absolutely not. I'll be using the 700 square foot, that I'm allowed to use for the bylaw, and the rest of it's just going to be cold storage for myself. I mean, I'm self-employed electrician, so I keep extra material and things on hand. So I'm just going to have shelving and things up there to be able to store, all extra material and tools and stuff that I do not use. And then the lower garage portion will be to park my vehicles and any maintenance on my vehicles that I do and things like that.
You just opened up a little bit of a couple more questions I need to ask then. Are you going to be running a business out of this garage?
No, absolutely not. I'm an electrician. I work at customers' houses and I do new construction, but I don't work a mechanic shop or anything. This is just where I I keep extra material and tools for my business, but I don't run a business out of here.
I'm all set right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think we've spent enough time pondering the sort of periphery of this situation. It boils down to whether or not we should make a motion on this application based on the information we have, provided that I think the membership agrees or disagrees or whatever, that this breezeway does not derogate or take away from the intent of the bylaw, which is where I think some people have some questions maybe. So with that being said, I would still like to make a motion to close the public portion of the hearing. Do I have a motion on that?
Mr. Chairman, Michael Marin, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Chacolo.
Thank you. Mr. Cuffey? Mr. Cuffey?
Yeah, you can close the meeting.
Thank you. I already got Mr. Marin, I got Mr. Chacolo, Mr. Cuffey. I need Mr. Jones.
Close.
Yeah,
Thank
go ahead and close.
And Chair, I agree. Okay. So with that being said, one more time around the horn here. Mr. Marin, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think what's before us is, we've discussed this application at length. I think what's before us is a thoughtful rendition of a lot of the comments that we've provided to this applicant. I think for me, I would, for one, like to, and again, the board can decide whether or not it's not. I'd like to see a final of what the deck looks like, what a final looks like. But that's not where I stick. I stick on whether or not this fits, and I think that's a discussion that the board should take on.
Okay. So your interpretation then, since you brought it up, we'll have to go around specifically discussing whether or not we feel as though it fits. So with that being said, what is your interpretation of that particular application?
For me, Mr. Chairman, this is a really aggressive approach to accommodating the bylaw. And I'm not making any judgments of whether or not it's appropriate or not to do it in such a fashion. I'm just falling back on whether or not this would fit into the character of the neighborhood for residential structure. But it seems to me 35-foot run corridor to connect two buildings to satisfy our bylaw is a really aggressive solution. I don't know that it fits.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Mr. Chacolo?
What was the final thing Mr. Marin just said?
So what we're doing is we're going around, we're discussing whether or not, I think I tried to boil down to what the concerns of the board is. I think, are we interpreting the bylaw as it was intended? And are we derogating from the intent and purpose of the bylaw by granting the application as it is now, and then probably adding a condition that it meets all building requirements and all the other standard conditions that we have, if we so choose to move forward. But I'm looking for your interpretation on whether or not this project has the intent and the purpose of the bylaw in mind when as it's presented.
All right, so you are at this time not asking for approve or deny?
I am not. I'm asking for your opinion on how this is interpreted as it applies to the bylaw.
I think it is a very long stretch of the bylaw to get an accessory apartment out of this. It is not a long stretch because we wouldn't even need this breezeway if it were just a garage, as the applicant has stated, to store material. But throwing in the accessory apartment takes off the necessity that it be a
Mr. Cussy, sir, your interpretation of this project as it relates to the bylaw.
I agree. It's quite a stretch. Connecting basically a tunnel to a garage to get an apartment. I think it's quite a stretch.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
I'd have to agree that, having this breezeway, being long enough that you could basically fit a Cape-style house between the accessory apartment and the existing home does make it seem to, go against the intent of the law here. I have to admit, though, I had not been looking at that previously. I think he has gone a long way to, meet the letter of the law, if not the intent.
Okay, so, we've waited, I've solicited everyone's opinion here. I'm really kind of up, and I mean, based on the lot, when I drove by, and it certainly does exceed, I think, or stretches the bylaw, so to speak. But based on the position of the house on the lot, the sort of just the whole setting of the lot itself, it does kind of sit that way. I understand that. Yeah, I agree with you, a 35-foot breezeway. I mean, but again, I'm sitting in my living room right now, and from the front of my house to the back of my house, and the addition you can see behind me is actually more than 35 feet. And I'm sitting here looking at it and say, well, gee, it's really not that long either. I mean, I don't know. It really comes down to how we want to interpret this breezeway, I think.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, please.
And I don't mean to interrupt your thoughts, but so I'm going to offer for the board a slightly different vantage point. So if we were, and I use the words, whether or not this fits within the character of the properties within the neighborhood, I'm going to offer a slightly different approach. If we might think of it as from a detriment to other butters and neighbors. We don't have the luxury of a butters speaking this evening, or I believe in the past of this project, but I'm challenged by the fact that I do think that this is a stretch. I don't particularly think this fits within the intent of our bylaw. But conversely, I also don't think that we have no evidence from a butter student that suggests that this would adversely affect or cause detriment to the neighborhood. Where I fall on this succinctly and weighing those two views is that I don't believe that the intent of constructing a structure to this depth and breadth really is the intent of the bylaw to connect our two structures to achieve an accessory apartment.
Okay, so the one thing I would like to add, however, to this conundrum is that there is no defined length of a breezeway in any of our bylaws. Now, I recognize that a breezeway is traditionally thought of as a open space with a roof and maybe some sliding windows or a porch or a mudroom between a garage and a home. But I really, Caleb, have you come across anything that says a breezeway can only be a certain number of feet long?
I wouldn't get into how long a breezeway could be. I don't think there's any clear definition. I would just point the board to page 90 of the bylaw. One of the conditions, I believe it's condition F. An addition to the original building is permitted provided that the addition does not increase the floor area or volume of the original building by more than 20%, and the addition will not alter the character of the building. So rather than discussing the length of the breezeway, that might be more the point that you want to discuss.
Yeah, does it alter the character of the building?
Correct.
Mr. Chacolo, did I hear you?
Well, you probably heard me go, but because that condition, it does not alter the character of the building because it's not attached to the building.
All right, so
Right, to be an accessory apartment, it must be part of the building, though.
right.
It must be attached to the building. If it's a separate accessory apartment. That's what creates the problem with this. If we're a garage, fine.
Well, again, I go back to the points that we've had. I know that each individual hearing is separate and distinct, and they are all weighed evenly on their own individual merit. However, that being said, yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. The more I look at it, the more honestly I don't know what to make of this. I want to help the applicant. I want to have him complete his goals, but I think that this is a difficult interpretation of the bylaw. Okay. Anyway, does anybody else have anything to add? All right, hearing none, seeing none. I'd like to make a motion to open the public portion of the hearing again to address the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Marin, I'll make a motion to open the public portion of the hearing.
Do I have a second?
Rich Cussy, second.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Campbell, you heard our discussion with the members of the board. I think the issue here is that we have to maintain the integrity of the bylaw. It's kind of, so one of the things we always concern ourselves is we try to help the applicant when something like this comes forward, but we also have to maintain the integrity of the bylaw, which lends itself to maintaining the integrity of our neighborhoods. With that being said, is there any way that garage could be moved closer to the house, shortening the breezeway? I mean, I think the board, I'm not speaking on behalf of the membership, but I think from what I can tell, reading the responses of the board member, is that I think we are stretching the intent and purpose of the bylaw with this particular length of breezeway.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously my intention is to make the breezeway as short as possible, for look and for cost-wise. This is why I initially committed, more of an open breezeway concept so that it wouldn't look as bulky if it was a little longer than I had hoped. It would be an open flow and you'd be able to look directly through it and see the woods in the back and everything, and it wouldn't look as bulky. Obviously my intent is to make it as short as possible. I just, depending on, my site contractor who, is a friend of mine who's going to be digging the foundation hole and everything for me. As far as where he says he thinks he can dig it for the best spot that he can dig it in, and to accommodate all the offsets and everything else. Obviously, the only thing I can really say is my intent is to make it as short as possible. Obviously, I didn't want a closed breezeway to begin with because of the bulkiness. So my intent, if it has to be closed in, my intent is to make it as short as I can possibly make it, to make it look as less bulky as possible, and to minimize my cost as much as possible.
Sure, yeah, exactly. I mean, because quite honestly, the square footage of that breezeway, I mean, what's the average construction cost? About $100 to $115 a square foot these days, right? So,
yeah, I mean, luckily, being an electrician, I have a lot of tradespeople, that are good friends of mine that I work with side by side every day on different jobs for different contractors. So, they're all going to help me out if they can. But at the end of the day, everybody needs to get paid a fair wage. So,
yeah. All right, so if you could just hold on 1 second, Mr. Campbell. So I'm want to refer back to the board members again. I'm going to start with Mr.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Just so we don't get into designing for the applicant, it may be more appropriate to see if the applicant wants to request a continuance or a withdrawal and go back to the drawing board. It doesn't
that's
sound.
kind of where I was headed with this. Exactly, yeah. So, Mr. Campbell, I think what you're hearing here is that if we probably went to a vote this evening, I think there are some doubts with the members of the board if we are maintaining the integrity and the intended purpose of the bylaw. I think if you could come back, I think we'd be willing to, and we're not trying to hold your project up, believe me, we want to work this out with you. But if you come back the July meeting with, I think, something that would be a little bit shorter of a breezeway, something a little more accommodating to the landscape, so to speak, and something that would be shorter that would be more appealing to the board, I think we might accomplish your goals.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I don't know how to show you that it's going to be shorter.
Well, I think see where if you speak with Caleb.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, sir, you may.
I don't think it's necessarily the length of the breezeway. I don't think the board is happy with the design. So maybe the applicant needs to rethink the design. The board is, from what I'm hearing, the board wants something that's attached to the house. And if it's a breezeway,
this is attached to the house. So
I mean, it is in theory attached to the house. I understand, but I think it's the length of the breezeway that the board finds it does not maintain the integrity of the bylaw.
So the last meeting, I was told that they wanted it connected, not to the deck like I had it before, but connected to the actual existing garage, and then connected to the new garage, and then enclosed. And Nicola said he would like to see, in his opinion, he'd like to see it closed, closed in with some walls and some windows and things. So if it's the length of it, I just don't know exactly how to show a shorter length on plans, other than having the designer just make it look smaller on the plans. Again, once everything's put in place, that's kind of where I'll be able to make it as short as I can possibly make it.
Right. All right. So I'm going to defer.
If I may, for the two.
Who is this, please?
Pete Jones.
All right, Mr. Jones, I will yield the floor to you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So I think we're looking at sections E and F here, and I think it's, as Mr. Moody said, it's not so much the length of the breezeway, but you appear to be getting into trouble with section E here by perhaps doubling the width of the house.
If I could speak to that, please, Mr. Chairman. So the breezeway is not necessarily going, exactly from left to right, spreading the width of the property. The breezeway is only going to spread the width of the property about 10 feet or so to get around the deck. And then it's almost going to be, again, the design's tough to clarify it, because the architect designer is just, doing what he can. But the breezeway is almost going to, span the width of the property just to get around the corner of the deck, and then almost go front to back of the property, towards the back of the property, to connect to the front corner of the new garage. So it's not going to widen the structure or widen the look of the house as much as it's going to make it look deeper towards the back of the property.
I think I can agree with the building engineer, Caleb Moody, that we need to have some further information on this. I mean, I think the best bet, quite honestly, is to probably request a continuation. I wouldn't necessarily maybe even have the opportunity to see if you could meet with Caleb, or at least talk to him on the phone, try to come up with some ideas to satisfy the members of the board that are not necessarily in agreement with what they consider this to be the...
Through the chair, if I may.
You may.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I cannot design this for the applicant. I think he needs to meet with his designer. and take back the board's concerns to his designer and come up with a better design. I can't design it for him, unfortunately.
No, and I apologize. I misspoke when I meant to say to refer to you. I was not referring to you as a design consultant. I apologize, but more of as someone that can represent as an interpretation of the bylaw type of thing. But I'm going to go around the horn one more time, and I think I'm looking for some guidance and some help from the board members on this, because I'm as confused as you are. I'd like to help the applicant, and I'd like to satisfy the requirements of the bylaw. So, with that being said, Mr. Marin, one last opportunity to speak.
Mr. Chairman, I focus and call the board's attention to something that's been mentioned earlier in the hearing. In the bylaw, and the note that clearly states changes made must conform to the single-family character of the neighborhood. And so I would agree with prior comments that we're not in the design business, nor should we be. The applicant takes that statement for what it is and takes the comments that we've made this evening. I think, for one, it's for me time. I think that we well understand the intent. I think that we understand the design, and I think we understand what the applicant's trying to accomplish. I think for me, it's time to either move forward with a vote or see what the applicant chooses to do here.
I agree. Okay. So with that being said, Mr. Campbell, I think you can tell what's been going on with the board. I would suggest that you may want to kind of rethink things and maybe ask for a continuation for the July meeting.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd love to definitely get a continuance and not a denial. I don't know exactly what I need to show, in order to satisfy, everybody's doubt. As far as conforming to the, but, my house is a Georgian colonial style with big pillars in the front. The house to the left of me is a regular, a normal colonial. The house to the right of me is a 3,000 square foot ranch. So, there's 3 doors down from me is an old farmhouse that I guess has been on Prospect Street for a very long time with almost 100 by 80 foot barn in the back. So, there's a lot of different character in this neighborhood. So I'm just not exactly sure how, what a design would look like that will satisfy everybody's doubts.
Right.
If I knew exactly what I needed to show, then I would absolutely spend the time and the effort to show whatever it is that I need to show to make everybody happy, so that everybody understands that, it's going to look good and it's going to be nice. I take pride in my home. I try to make everything look as good as possible and keep up with the landscape and the siding and keep a neat looking kitchen and cosmetics and things. So I'm not sure what I need to show.
Okay, and I totally understand that, and I don't think I can really offer you advice from the members of the board in terms of what you need to show. What I think we have to do here is with the continuation, I think is the best bet for you to move forward. Maybe a more solid set of plans, or again, work with your designer to come up with something that's a little bit more in tune to what the interpretation of the bylaw is what it comes down to.
Okay, if I could just address, I know Mr. Chicola was the one who really would love to see like the closed-in breezeway in the windows. Mr. Chicola, if I was would we be able to revisit at all the open breezeway concept to make it look less bulky, so it doesn't, so it conforms more to the neighborhood, looking a little cleaner that way? Is that possible at all?
So,
I don't know if I should be offering that opinion.
Right, I agree. I think I have to be honest with you. I think as a board here, what we're trying to do is, I honestly think that we kind of. Who's got the background noise going?
Mr. Cussy. Mr. Cussy has background noise going. I just muted him, Bob. You're all set.
All right, thank you. I'm honestly at a loss. If I think right now that if we move to a vote that you're probably not going to like the outcome, and I understand your frustration with trying to reinterpret this bylaw, and I honestly, we just don't have the authority to offer you suggestions on how to get around it. It has to be something that has to be worked out with you and your planner. I think what you're hearing here is that there is an incomplete set of plans, and the board's interpretation of a breezeway is not the same as what we are seeing here on the application. I think what they want to see is a more literal interpretation of the bylaw, which would mean the garage with the apartment, accessory use apartment, would be closer to the existing house and would be tied in with somewhat of a smaller and more conventional style breezeway.
Yeah, I understand. I just, the bylaw states, last meeting, everyone said that it needed to be connected. The breezeway needed to be enclosed with windows and whatnot. And, Caleb had read the definition of a breezeway, and he's saying there's no length requirement per se. I believe I'm conforming to the bylaw as far as the accessory apartment the structures need to be connected.
Right. And I don't disagree with you in terms of literal interpretation of the bylaw. However, as a board, our requirement is to maintain what was the original intent and purpose of the definition of the bylaw. So that's where I think we struggle. We would try to help you, but at the same time, we cannot extend beyond what we reasonably, what the standard here is, what a reasonable person would consider to be the interpretation of this bylaw. And that's really our standard. So are we stretching this too far, or are we allowing it because there is no specification in the bylaw because of the length of the breezeway?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I would ask you to give me a yes or a no if I said to you I was going to do this same project at my house and my breezeway was going to be 150 feet long. Would you say that I was within the intent of the bylaw?
Well, again, I understand what your argument is, but we can't speak in hypotheticals here. We only have to be able to address what is taking place in front of us as a board today.
No, you're not talking hypothetical. You're talking about a measurement that is or is not within the intent of the bylaw.
Right.
And the measurement for what we would consider reasonable. What we're doing here is trying to fit in an accessory apartment into this intent of the bylaw because it's two separate buildings. So we're trying to fit it in somehow. And in this particular case, it may not be able to be fit in. As a garage, as I explained, sure, it can be fit in, but to put an accessory apartment above the garage, I don't think it can fit into the bylaw. Yes, it would be nice, but if it is to be used as the applicant said it was for his wire and extra things from jobs because he's an electrician, that's fine. That's a garage.
So, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here for a minute and speak sort of to the experience of the applicant, which is now being on our third meeting with this discussion. One, because we did not really know whether it should be an enclosed or an open breezeway. The second delay or continuation was because of the interpretation of the deck and how that was going to be blended with the garage. And now we are here with those two things being said and those two hurdles that have been surpassed. And now we are determining that the breezeway may not be in the intent and purpose of the bylaw. So
I think it's because now we're seeing a full view of everything. As we had mentioned, we had some reservations. Those reservations have been addressed by the applicant, and that is what is presenting to us now the full view of what this would look like.
okay, so again, I'm going to go back to the applicant, Mr. Campbell. You can see the discussions with the board here. We recognize that you have been making a sincere effort to accommodate the requirements here, but I think that if we were to move to a vote today, that I think the outcome may not necessarily be that favorable. So I think it might be in everyone's best interest to request another continuation and maybe try to rethink things and come back in July.
Okay, so yeah.
You, sir.
Okay, yeah. So I'll definitely ask for a continuance. I guess my only thing would be, is there anything that any member of the board would like me to do specifically in the design to make sure that you are all, happy and okay with it?
Through the chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Caleb.
So I think what the applicant's not understanding is this. I don't think this design is going to be favorable to the board unless the addition is right up against the house, like the bylaw intends. I don't think the breezeway attaching two separate structures is going to be looked on favorably by the board. So maybe you need to go back to the drawing board completely, because I don't think it's so much the length of the breezeway as it is that there's two separate structures connected by a tunnel is the problem here.
Okay, so because of the way the deck is designed, I think the most minimal I think the only way for me to connect these two structures because of the way the deck is designed is I would have to have at least a 10 to 12 foot breezeway. If I can design it for that and make it work, would that be acceptable to the board?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Who is this? Mr. Marin, yes, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think we're headed to a slippery slope of advising on design. I don't think that there are appropriate questions for the board to answer directly. So design changes would be up to the applicant. I would make the request respectfully that we ask the applicant if he's firm on a continuance, we move forward with that.
I agree. Okay. So, Mr. Campbell, I think Mr. Marin, as he spoke, again, we really can't offer you any design ideas. We would be overstepping our bounds and our responsibilities and scope of members of the board by doing that. I think when you hear what the concerns are, I think you can go in a certain direction by saying that you'd either have to have a substantially much shorter breezeway, or you would, as Caleb mentioned, need to be connected more directly to the house itself.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'd like to ask for a continuance, please.
Okay. So on behalf of the applicant, go ahead, sir.
I apologize for interrupting you, but I want to be absolutely clear here. So and Bob, succinctly, you always come from a really good place of trying to find common ground to make things work. But I want to make sure that from a protection perspective, that we are not advising the applicant of a formula whereby he would come back and be successful with a vote. I think that it's clearly up to him to present us with what he feels to be conforming to the bylaw, and we'll make our judgment at that time. But I would not want to suggest that anything that the applicant has suggested this evening would be what we would agree to in a future meeting.
Right, and I also want to add too is when I say to somebody like that whether it be option A or option B, I am certainly not speaking on behalf of any member of the board. I'm merely expressing my individual opinions on that. So it would be up to obviously the members of the board, as we've said before, we all have an individual, an equal vote and say. So it really is an individual choice. So with that being being said, Mr. Campbell has requested a continuation until the July 16th meeting. Do I have a motion on the floor to accept or deny the applicant's request for continuation?
Mr. Chairman, Michael Marin, I'd make a motion to accept the applicant's request for continuation.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I got a second from Mr. Chicola. Mr. Cussy, how do you vote? I'm sorry, Mr. Cussy, I couldn't record your vote.
Yeah, let him continue.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Continue.
Thank you, and the chair votes to continue.
Continue.
Okay, so we have a full vote of the membership of the board to continue to the July 6th meeting. So, Mr. Campbell, good luck. We will see you in July.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's give him a chance to clear. We'll move on to our 505. They've been patiently waiting for an hour at this point. I'm going to move to the 505 PM applicant Eastland Partners Incorporated, requesting a comprehensive permit under Mass General Law Chapter 40B for workforce housing apartments on property located at 109 Tinker Hill Road, Auburn, Mass, map 59, parcel 8 and 26, Albert Street, Auburn, Mass, map 65, parcel 71, and this is a continuation from 5/21/20. And we are discussing peer review this evening, the results of said peer review, and we are going to open it up for comments from any abutters that may be present and would like to speak. So before I begin, do I have a request or a motion on the floor to open the 505 hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to open the 505 hearing as stated.
Thank you. Mr. Marin has made the motion to open. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cussy? Mr. Cussy? Mr. Cussy?
This is Mr.
Mr. Jones, you vote to open the meeting, please. We got to keep moving here. We need you to kind of hang with us, folks. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Cussy, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So the presenters for
Yes, so open.
Eastern Partners.
Open.
Mr. Chairman.
Open.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, Mr. Marin.
So before we proceed with the applicant, for clarity, I'd like for the board to fully understand, or I'll speak for myself, I'd like to fully understand what's before us. I think we've got it, Rich. So I'd like to fully understand what's before us this evening. I understand this upper discussion is peer review. I understand that peer review has been received by the applicant and by us, and that the applicant has not responded to that peer review, or at least we don't have the documentation of that response. And so I'd like just clarity on whether or not any action this evening would need to be postponed and waiting for that peer review response. And if that's the case, we may be able to save some time.
If I may, through the chair.
He's muted.
Caleb, I believe Bob is muted.
Stop doing that. All right, thank you. I can absolutely work my own mute button. I appreciate it. So, Caleb, go ahead, sir.
So, I understand that the peer review, they haven't responded to the peer review. I think I would recommend that the board give the applicant the opportunity to make a presentation tonight and hear any abutters that are maybe present.
Correct. That was if you recall when I opened the hearing, that was the intent of my purpose of this part of the hearing. They were going to have the opportunity to respond, give their presentation. We were going to listen to abutters, and then we were going to move forward with most likely a continuation or whatever the board had seen as necessary. So anyway, I digress. The presenters here this evening.
We're not taking any voting action this evening, correct?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct, sir. We are not taking any action this evening. We are allowing for a presentation to take place from the applicant for the response to the peer review, and then we're going to allow butters to speak, and then we will be moving forward from there. And that was per a email I received prior to the meeting, as requested by the Department of Inspectional Services.
Thank you for that clarity, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Okay, so is the applicant present?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. This is Clay Williams with Eastland Partners. Thanks for the introduction.
Good evening, sir. I apologize for the delay. Sometimes, as you see, we have some unique things that come before the board, but I'm going to turn the floor over to you if you'd like to get the board and all the concerned citizens up to speed on what's going on.
Great. So we'll start off tonight with my short municipal impact analysis presentation that looks at different ways this new community would interact with the town of Auburn. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Can everybody see this and read it all right?
I can see it clearly. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Great. So, like I said, this is my municipal impact analysis for the Reserve, a workforce housing community off of Albert Street. Like I said, since this is workforce housing, 25% of these units will be offered to individuals and families that make 80% or less of the median income, which based on current numbers is about $60,000 for two people. Here is our bedroom breakdown, how these three different unit types make up 324 homes. As you can see, we've got a larger number of 1 and 2 bedroom units to decrease the impact on the town of Auburn. Here is our site plan, which you have in your packets, that shows how the buildings on the site relate to our neighbors and also internally. As you can see, we have maintained appropriate distances from abutting properties. The closest is, just over 100 feet away. So, why does a community like this make sense at this location? First of all, we're taking advantage of existing infrastructure improvements. If you've been to the area, you'll know that there is a controlled stop interchange at the end of Albert Street with Route 20. Also, in terms of Auburn's current subsidized housing inventory, or how much affordable housing the town has, with this project and the 2 school developments, it will actually push you over the 10% mandated minimum. And then also, with a community of this size, it will make other projects like a water connection more economically feasible, and other things that Eastland may do in the town. So getting into the impacts here, this data is from a company called eConsult Solutions. They specifically look at data, and one of the things that they do is they project how many school-age children would live in a certain type of housing. So based on their numbers, you're looking at just under 70 with 69 school kids. In terms of our traffic study, our updated report was just finished today and will be sent over tomorrow in the morning. We submitted our previous traffic study from the end of 2016, and it ended up with a clean bill of health. We have all A, B, and C level of service, and that's really going back to that stoplight that I spoke about a little earlier. In terms of roadway and DPW impacts, this will be a private community. Everything will be owned and maintained by the community and the property management company, so the town of Auburn won't carry any maintenance costs here. And as you can see right here, this is where the community is related, or is placed in relation to Route 20. In the top right-hand corner of your screen, you see this red star, which indicates an existing fire station. Wingate Properties will be our property manager for this community. They currently manage some of the existing apartments that Eastham Partners has owned and operated for about 15 years now. They're a national management company. They have a very large portfolio and a strong reputation. And, anybody who would live at the reserve is going to go through strict background checks through Wingate. Since we are permitting this community through DHCD, or the Department of Housing and Community Development, a local preference will be a part of this community. And what that means is that up to 70% of the reduced rate units can be set aside for these 4 different groups of people who are already in Auburn. Either people who live in town, people who work for the town, maybe somebody who works at a local business, or a household with children that are already in the school system.
Okay.
So like I mentioned earlier, in terms of the benefits for 40B, currently, and also as the previous numbers came out in 2017, Auburn is sitting at 3.7% with 251 units of affordable housing. The 2 school redevelopments make up another 116 units. And since the reserve is a rental community, every single one of these units will count towards your SHI. And like it said at the bottom, you will be just over 10% at 10.1. The town of Auburn has a housing production plan. This is basically a way for you as a town to take your future into your own hands. Once you are in compliance or above that 10%, you will have 2 strong benefits. One is that you will become temporarily appeal-proof. So if another developer goes to the 40B and you as the board decide that it would not be a good fit for that community, you have the final say. And second is that you will be given priority for certain state grant funds due to your significant drive towards affordable housing. Another strong benefit with this community is the amount of green space that's associated. Since we are proposing 3-story walk-up apartments, we will only develop about 18 acres of the site, leaving the remaining 50 or so acres undeveloped with walking trails. And now we're going to get into some of the revenues that are associated with this community. As you can see, you're looking at just under $200,000 in excise tax from the vehicles of these new residents. Here's the calculation for the annual real estate tax revenue based on the most current tax rate from the assessor. The town is looking to collect just over $1.2 million every year from the reserve. Here is a breakdown of the sewer revenues. As you can see on the top portion of the slide, we're looking at collecting just over $360,000 just in permit fees alone, and then another $14,000 or so per year in the actual usage revenue. So moving past the revenues into the cost, it's standard in municipal impact forecasting to use a per household cost method. So you would take the total budget of a town department and divide it by the total number of households in town according to the most recent census. Then you would take that per household cost, multiply it by 324 new homes at the reserve, and you would get your projected economic impact. So here is the list of the projected costs that go along. We have the 69 school-age children that I mentioned earlier, and then approximately $100,000 each for for police and fire. These numbers were gone over with both Captain Greg Marin from Public Safety and Chief Lucas from the Police Department. And then the DPW impact is lower since all of the infrastructure in the community will be owned and maintained by the property management company. So here is the summation of all the annual revenues once the community is fully rented and stabilized. The town of Auburn is looking at collecting just over $1.4 million a year. And then here are the one-time costs that will be paid upon completion through building permits and sewer connections. So all in all, the town is looking at collecting just over $600,000 yearly with just over $1.2 million in the year that construction is completed. This slide shows some data from a website called We Are Apartments, which looks at the economic impact of new apartment homes at the city and state level. And based on their website, over $150 million and 1,100 jobs will be supported from the reserve, both in residents living there at the end use and in actual construction jobs in building the community. So Auburn has a sort of interesting situation. During the day, in normal conditions, the population just about doubles. You have just over 16,000 residents, and the midday population is counted at over 34,000, with things like the mall and other, high job-creating areas. Most of the workers who live in town end up commuting out of town and working somewhere else. And on the other side, most of the jobs in town are actually filled by people who live outside of Auburn. That is a big reason why we are proposing a community like this. If we can get people who work in Auburn and live in Auburn, it decreases congestion, improves people's quality of life, and just is an overall benefit to the town and the area. So with that, that's going to conclude my municipal impact analysis presentation, and I'll turn it over to Steve. Yeah, are there any questions before I turn it over to Steve?
No, sir. We're just going to go through your presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to any of the butters that are present.
Great. So before we do that, I'll turn it over to Steve O'Connell, our design engineer with Turning Point Engineering, to talk about the peer review comments.
Thank you, Clay. Members, my name is Steve O'Connell with Turning Point Engineering. Just do a brief overview about the site and the project. For anyone who's not familiar with the exact locus, access to the reserve apartment community will be gained through an existing subdivision road, which is still under construction but currently accessible, called Albert Street. Comes off Route 20, crosses over Blaker Street, and into a 5-lot subdivision. Lot 1 of the subdivision will serve as the frontage and part of the total area of the apartment community. Access will be gained off of a paved roadway near the cul-de-sac, affording access to all 12 of the buildings situated uniquely on the site based on existing topographic and groundwater conditions, as all went into the aspects of the site layout. There's one principal driveway that comes up. As you approach into the site, you come across the clubhouse where you can go left or you can go right, depending on your apartment location. Continuing up to the left, you come to a cul-de-sac where meets all fire department apparatus requirements. A second emergency form of egress is provided through a paved access road out to Tinker Hill Road. That will be a gated access for emergencies only. So the main entrance off of Albert Street is the principal access into and out of the project. The parking areas associated with each proposed building are provided. They'll be paved, landscaped, and well lit. We are centrally located clubhouse with maintenance building and trash building for the residents. We have we have a recreation area designated on the property. Stormwater collected in all of these areas will be done so in traditional fashion with catch basins and a closed piping network, conveying stormwater runoff to one of 3 proposed stormwater basins on site. Stormwater basins will collect, treat, detain, and then release stormwater to existing runoff locations, so there'll be no increase in post-development runoff flows. We have very little wetlands buffer zone impacts. There are no direct wetland impacts, only minor buffer zone impacts. We will be in front of the Auburn Conservation Commission at an upcoming meeting with a notice of intent application. Water will be provided and town sewer provided to the project. And that's an overall summary of the normal topics involved with a development of this type. So we did receive comments from the peer review of VHB. That was much appreciated, their expeditious review. I think I'd like to just point out that there's nothing in this review, in our experience, that tells us that this project is not a feasible, buildable, and can be a successful project. All of their comments are straightforward, addressable. We will be providing written responses. What we normally like to do is collect all the comments from peer reviewers, board members, abutters, department heads, to make sure that we can have a comprehensive response document. Any plan revisions associated with this response will also be provided, and updated stormwater calculations as well. But as I indicated, as we've gone through these comments one by one, there's nothing here that we find problematic with the project as proposed, and we expect that you'll agree with that. Happy to address any specific comments you have or answer any questions you have about the project.
So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Do we have any abutters currently present on this matter? If so, could you introduce yourself, please? You got to give us your name and address.
This is Eileen Lassard at 11 Blaker Street. Are you able to hear me?
I am. Thank you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes. I have a couple of concerns. They mentioned the 2016 traffic study, which does not take into account the additional duplexes that they're putting in at the corner of Albert and Blaker Street, which is going to impact, obviously, traffic on that intersection, which I'm very concerned about. There is a stop sign that was put up by Eastland at that, but it's not a town-mandated stop sign. So I'm very concerned about how the traffic's going to flow there, as well as the parking that they have provided for the units that they seem awfully far away from where the apartments are, and also the 10% minimum for the moderate income is also going to be impacted by the additional duplexes that they've requested and are waiting for approval on.
Okay, so if to the applicant, if you could take note that they have concerns about the traffic pattern as it relates to the additional duplexes. Go ahead, ma'am.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, you cut off again.
That's all I have for now.
Okay, so as he had mentioned, what they're going to do is they're going to take note of all of the concerns, and they'll be addressed at this meeting.
I can't hear what you're saying. There's some background. Not hearing you at all.
We'll repeat that again. So they're going to take note of all these concerns, and their plan is to, at the next hearing, to address all of them individually.
Excellent. Thank you. And does the public have access to the responses that they provide?
Oh, you can be at the next meeting. You can hear it, and they'll be available at the town hall. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening. Thank you. Is there anyone else very much who would like to speak?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm not fine, but this is Mark Bernal, 4 Field Street, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4, Town Representative, the Worcester Regional Transit Authority. Will they allow the WRT buses to pull in there, make sure the road's wide enough for the bus shelter? There are routes that go by that area.
Right, so you're concerned to make sure that the road is wide enough near the bus shelter?
To get 420 in.
Okay, so we'll make note of that, and they will address that at the next hearing.
Okay, and I have some other things. So, how many handicap parking spaces in each spot available for a van? And how many accessible apartments for the handicap?
So I believe that's all set forth by both the Americans with Disabilities Act and state requirements, but we will also have them address the number of handicap units. We will have them specifically talk about their accessibility and the relation to being able to park handicapped vans or other accessory vehicles in relation to the handicapped parking spaces, apartments, excuse me.
How many floors in the apartments?
Well, again, they're going to be addressing all these things individually, so we're taking the abutters' comments and concerns, and that's what they're going to talk about for the next one.
Okay.
So the other concern is how many floors are the apartments?
Yes. And also, like, to be accessible for all the disabilities, the blind and people in wheelchairs.
Again,
okay, thank you.
ADA compliant requirements, which have been pretty standard and strict since the 80s, but I will certainly have them address any of those other concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Do I have any other abutters that would like to speak on this particular hearing?
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve O'Connell from Turning Point. If it's the pleasure of the board, it might be easy to address some of these comments verbally, for the abutters. They're pretty straightforward. We can also respond in writing, but it might be beneficial to just kind of address them so we can, maybe move on to other topics.
If you're prepared to do so, sir, I would welcome that. Thank you.
So I'll start with Mr. Lassard. The 2016 traffic impact report, I don't believe did account for the 8 condominiums that are under construction. However, the new updated traffic impact report does, and that'll be made available to the public as soon as available on the website when we submit it as early as tomorrow. So it's a good comment, and that's the response. The temporary stop sign that's in place now was at the request of DPW from a construction control device. Upon completion and development of this project, our understanding is that's the wish of the DPW that be a 4-way stop. There'll be a stop sign coming from both sides of Albert and both sides of the intersection from Blake. And parking for the units are all very proximate to each proposed unit. There are parking spaces within parking lots that are all proximate, very close to each unit proposed. I think the plan illustrates that clearly. If we're happy to provide some dimensions if that isn't clear. Perhaps at a larger scale plan it would be more clear, which is available.
This is Clay Williams with Eastern Partners. I can respond to the gentleman from the WRTA. About a month or so ago, I spoke with a member of the CMRP, the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, who served as an advisory member to the WRTA, and we started to talk about the potential of using this site. He seemed to think that it may be feasible to put a bus stop somewhere along the way in here. But if it is not, that route that runs along Route 20 currently operates as what's called flag service. So anybody walking by could kind of stick an arm out at the bus and it would pull over and pick you up. And as part of the subdivision, we included pedestrian facilities out to Route 20, so anybody looking to walk could do so safely and efficiently. In terms of the accessible parking or accessible units, we have 96 ground floor units through those that are either walkouts in the rear of the unit or in the rear of the building or on the front. And I am going to the plans right now that show the amount of accessible units that we have. Just give me 1 second here. So we'll give this a second to load.
While Clay's pulling that up, every parking area for each building does have designated ADA parking stalls, and each parking area will be treated independently. So for every proportional required parking space, a van designated space will be provided. There may be opportunities to provide additional ADA compliant parking if the residentship calls for it, but there's absolutely the intention to meet or exceed ADA compliant parking.
Right. So following that up, this is Clay Williams with Eastland. We have 27 open air handicap parking spaces, and then we also have 5 handicap parking spaces within the garage buildings.
Okay. So one of the things I would like to specifically ask about is I received a copy of a letter, and I just want to make sure. Let me see. I don't actually. Oh, so it's dated 5/14/20, signed by a captain. It looks like Gregory Cummings, I think. I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's Gregory.
Addressing 18.114, 115, 2348. So it was like fire apparatus access road plans, fire apparatus access plans. Shall be able to seal and signature responsible the registered professional engineer. Travel in the opposing lane, fire department access roads. Are those all the concerns that were listed in this letter been addressed, or at least discussed?
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve O'Connell. Internally, they've been addressed. You will see the results of that revision in a plan issuance. We received those comments fairly early on in the process, which gave us the opportunity to address them. And they were very easy to address. His comments were applicable to really only one part of the site, which we've addressed, which you'll see on a revised plan set.
Excellent. I appreciate that. I just, obviously, we take the safety of the fire people there obviously very, very seriously, and obviously of the residents as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to look at those. I am going to go ahead and just open it up to the members of the board so they can express any concerns or comments that they may be thinking of that I am not, and we can move forward and we can set up a time and date for the next presentation. So with that being said, Vice Chair Marin, do you have any questions, concerns for the applicant?
No comments. I'd like to move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Gicolo. Thank you. Mr. Cussy.
No comments.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
Nothing.
All right, thank you. So, for the record, actually, Ms. Roach, do you have anything for the applicant?
I apologize since I was not present at the last hearing, so my only question would just be, assuming they get their approvals and permits and everything, what's the projected start for the construction and the finish? And again, I apologize if that's been asked and answered already.
It hasn't, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Roach. This is Clay Williams with Eastland Partners. Thank you for that question. We are targeting approximately the spring of next year for the finished construction, and 18 months? Approximately, 18 to 24 months to total rent up and completion.
Okay, so next year, about a 2-year project.
Yes, that's correct.
Ms. Bush, so while we're here, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I don't at this time.
Thank you very much. All right, with that being said, I think that's it. We're going to probably move forward, and we will see you. Are we going to see you again at the July meeting, or are you anticipating a little bit later? What do you think?
No, we're ready to move forward as aggressively as the board is comfortable. We have the comments. We're working with staff to receive other department comments. So we'd like to move forward at the next meeting, please.
All right, so we're going to put you on the agenda for the July 16th meeting.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right.
Through the chair,
Yes, sir.
we would need them to officially request a continuance to July 16th.
Absolutely. I just happened to notice that somebody else logged on, so I was going to see if there were any more abutters present that may be interested in speaking regarding this application.
Eileen, let's start again. May I ask another question?
I'm sorry, can you say what it is again?
I'm sorry. Could you say again, please?
Could you just identify yourself, your name and address, and then go ahead and ask the question?
Yes. It's Eileen Lassard again at 11 Blaker Street. I know that on Albert Street, are there any bylaws that protect the frontage of the property owners currently there? Because I know they've lost frontage for sidewalks. They just moved the telephone poles back 3 feet. And I know one house there that's not going to have room to park their car in their driveway. Is there any bylaw that protects them?
So I honestly, this is the first I'm hearing that. I would not want to speak to those bylaws that, as far as protection is concerned. I will, in fact, defer it to the building commissioner. Caleb can possibly at least take note and maybe address some of those concerns.
So through the chair, any movement of telephone poles or sidewalks would be within the right-of-way that is owned by the town. Property lines have not been moved. No property's been taken from anybody. That's all I can really say on that.
Right. I think it was basically just, of all the setback requirements is pretty much covering that. All right, ma'am, does that answer your question?
I don't understand it because they did tar, so I thought that they did lose the property, and it might be during that right of way. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into it, but thank you for addressing it.
All right, and again, this will be an opportunity next month to address something like that again.
Thank you.
All right. So with that being said, so for the Eastland Partners, I would need you to formally request a continuation to the July 6th meeting, and then I'll have the board vote on it.
Yeah, this is Clay Williams with Eastland Partners. I would like to request a continuance to the July DBA hearing.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. So I have a request from the applicant for a continuation to the July 16th meeting. Do I have a motion on that request?
Mr. Chairman, Michael Marin, I'll make a motion to accept the continuation request as noted.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Chico and Mr. Jones. So, Mr. Jones, I take it that will be a yes to you, sir?
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Guffey?
Yep, continue.
Thank you, and I vote also to continue, so good luck. You've heard the concerns, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you next month.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, please. Okay, so the Eastland 505 has been ended. I'm going to give it about 30 seconds. I will start reading, let everybody kind of clear out. 510 applicant.
That was great. Change it on to the party. Yeah, you're going to go have a drink. Exactly.
I'm going to get a beer.
But,
I mean,
We need to coach Caleb. We need to coach Caleb to drive on forever. It's where it's that previous applicant. Well, it's interesting you say that. I don't see it. Perhaps you could see it. Ask them to go ahead and drop.
All right, so I'm sorry, Mr. Marin, they just muted Clayton Williams. Can you please go ahead and say that again? I couldn't hear you. Both lines were open.
No, it was just a request to acknowledge that the previous applicant Mike was live and just giving them an opportunity so that they could fully drop. I think that we're all set now.
Thank you, I agree. Okay, so we have the 510 applicant Lisa Heller requesting a special permit under section 8.3.1 of the Auburn zoning bylaw for an addition to a non-conforming structure on a property located at 183 Boyd Street, Auburn, map 10, parcel 62. Is the applicant present?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, good evening, Ms. Heller. My name is Robert Tatro. I'm the chair of the board. I would like to give you the opportunity in 1 minute to discuss what's going on, but do I have a motion on the floor to open the hearing?
So,
a motion on the floor to open the hearing.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Marin.
Motion to open
the hearing.
All right, Michael Marin, do I have a second?
second this Meg.
All right. Ms. Rhodes, you got a second?
Jones, second.
Okay, so hearing is open. If you could just kind of stick with us here, we're almost getting through this. Hang with me here. So, Ms. Heller, if you could just kind of go over what you have for plans in front of us and discuss what you'd like to do.
Sure. Thank you, board members. So I'm looking to put a 20 by 20 addition onto my home. I adopted a little boy, and he does not currently have his own bedroom. So as you can see on the plan, it fits within the current bounds of my house, so it's not going to stick out any further than the current bounds. The reason for the special permit is because on the opposite side of where the addition is going, I am only 6.5 feet from that neighbor. So I'm a non-conforming structure.
And you say the 6.5 feet from the neighbor on the other side from where the addition is going?
That's correct.
Okay. It's got to be 20 by 20. What's the total square foot of that?
400.
Okay. Just making sure I need to answer those questions. I can't give them for the record, so.
Gotcha.
Okay, so board, I'm going to open it up. Mr. Marin, sir?
I don't have any questions at this time, Mr. Chairman. I'll reserve.
Thank you. Mr. Chicolo? All right, we'll come back to Mr. Chicolo. Mr. Cussy?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Roach?
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead. Mr. Jones? We'll come back to Mr. Jones. Mr. Chicolo, are you there?
Yes, I am. No questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Bush?
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
No, but I would like to say congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I adopted it 2 years ago, so it's a long time coming.
Okay, so I have no questions from the board members of the applicant. Building Commissioner Moody, is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
I have nothing.
Thank you. Okay. So, do I have a motion on the 5:10 p.m. applicant for the issuance or denial of a
Through the
special
chair.
permit?
Mr. Chairman,
Check with the butters.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have any abutters present? All right, I'll give it a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, apparently we have no abutters present. Thank you for reminding me of that. I appreciate it. So do I have a motion on the 510?
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Meg.
All right, do we have any conditions?
I would just say the regular conditions that come along with the special permit.
Excellent, thank you. So I have a motion approved from Ms. Rhodes with the standard conditions as they apply to the special permits. Do I have a second?
Yeah, Rich Cussy, second.
Thank you, Mr. Cussy. Vice Chair Maron, how do you vote?
I approve.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Giacomo, how do you vote, sir? I'm sorry, Mr. Schroeder, I missed it. All right, Mr. Cussy.
Yes, approve.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Giacomo, are you there? And how do you vote, sir? Thank you very much, and I approve also. So good luck then. I'm sure you can be in contact with the fine folks at the town hall, and they'll issue and give you any permits you may necessarily need. So congratulations and good luck.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
All right, take care, stay safe.
You too.
I do not have any other new business or other business to attend to, but I will state before closing that our next meeting is for July 16th, 2020. I believe we will still be doing remote meetings at this point unless other things change from the governor. So these will remain at a 5 p.m. start time. And again, if there are any applicants or continuations, they'll all be duly notified and the neighbors will also. So with that being said, do I have a motion to close the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, before we close, if I may, just a piece of housekeeping I'd like to bring up.
Of course.
So I want to make the suggestion, and Caleb may weigh into this, and maybe it's out of our control based on the applicants and how they present themselves. But I want to make this the suggestion. It appears that we're going to be working through this 40B piece for some meetings to come. And so to be sensitive to other applicants, particularly the last one who waited a fair amount of time and had to sit through that. But certainly it's their option to sit through the hearings if they choose. But I'm going to make the suggestion that we move, if it's possible, this 40B applicant to the end of our agenda in future meetings.
I agree with that administratively. And we could also probably stagger call-in times too as well. If we have 2 or 3 applicants that are local, you know, with sort of the ones we experienced this evening, they can certainly call in at a given time, and then we could probably have, you know, the New England properties on standby and make them go last just for the, as you said, the convenience of the others.
Yeah, I mean, I just think up the topic of being sensitive. You know, we've got residents that are coming into this meeting for their applications, and they may or may not have an interest. It seems to be our larger piece of work with presentations and dialogue and so forth. And so it's just a suggestion. Now, if we were able to publish the time, then anyone that was in a butter could join later in the call and not have to sit through earlier. So just a suggestion to be sensitive and hopefully extend that courtesy to residents that have hearings that might not want to sit through that.
I agree. Duly noted, and thank you, Mr. Maron. I appreciate that. So if at all possible, then we will schedule that as such. We'll put what would be normally considered to be the less complicated hearings first, and then we can put the Eastland properties last on the agenda, and it'll kind of make things probably a little bit easier for everyone.
Through the chair, we will schedule any new applicants at the beginning of the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So with that being said, we don't have any other agenda items this evening. Our next meeting is July 16th, and I had mentioned already that it looks like we will continue to be doing the remote meetings. It will likely be a 5 o'clock start, and I'm confident that if that does change, the adequate notifications will go out prior to the meeting. So with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second, Rich Cussy.
Okay, Mr. Jones. Ms. Bush. Ms. Roche.
I agree. Adjourned.
Okay. Mr. Cuffey.
Adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll see you next month.